So hello, my name is Julia Wasilewski and I'm an assistant professor in the drama department at the University of Lethbridge. Beside me here, I have brought a selection of costumes from the drama department to help illustrate some of the ideas that we'll be talking about here today. So one of the first things I look for when shopping for clothes is the placement and size of a garment's pockets. For years, I'd simply buy clothing with or without pockets and then install my own if they were missing. Purchasing garments from brands that support women by providing them with functional pockets from the get-go has become a priority now. For too long, women have been forced to do as I did, sneak pockets into clothing that didn't already accommodate it, or alternatively, rely on someone else to carry their important objects for them. So why is it so important to have our own pockets? With pockets come possessions, personal objects, identification, and most importantly, access to personal money. All of these things afford an individual freedom of movement, access to goods and services, and personal comfort. The absence of pockets can be viewed historically as a means to subjugate those without the pockets, forcing them to become dependent on others to provide for them. Primarily, this has been men. Even the advent of purses, which have allowed women to carry their personal possessions on their person, still limit her physical ability to work, play, and be an active member of society by encumbering one of her hands with the task of carrying the purse at all times. So in Western fashion, we can trace the issue of personal pockets back to the late 17th century. During the Middle Ages, both women and men wore pouches tied to belts on the outside of their clothing, which were easily accessible. This started to change as men and women's fashion became more distinct from each other, and what we know as the men's three-piece suit began to evolve. Instead of tying pouches to the outside of their clothing, men started to have these pouches sewn directly to their clothing in the form of large visible pockets. At the same time, women's dress moved towards an ever-exaggerated female form, tightly corseted to highlight a tiny waist, was more voluptuous through the hip, and because of this, more heavy to wear and limiting in their movement. In no way did these garments incorporate visible pockets as was seen in men's costumes of the time. The best illustration of this shift is during the decadence of the Baroque and Rococo movements, which were known to celebrate the excess and glory of the elite. Women of the upper classes were seen as decorative objects on which to display the power and wealth of their families, giving them little purpose other than to be visual feasts for the eyes, as seen here in this lovely example of a costume from the period. So the hips are padded and exaggerated, the waist is corseted, and the bust and shoulders are softened. Women of the lower classes often mimicked the style of the elite, and their dress followed the same lines of these elaborate costumes, but in simpler fabrics and to a less drastic scale. In these outfits, women were forced to hide their personal possessions into pocket pouches, which were tied to her waist and hidden within the depths of her skirts, well past beyond all of these many layers. To access these objects, women had well-disguised slit cut into their skirts and petticoats and under petticoats, all of which they'd have to dig past in order to get to the rather large and functional pockets hidden well beneath. These pockets were known to contain everything from snuff boxes, money, jewelry, sewing kits, journals, and even sometimes food. Women of the lower classes were allowed to make additional use of aprons with pockets to carry some of their more functional objects, but were never known to carry valuables out in the open for fear of theft or loss. Respectable upper class women were not given aprons in the same way, as they were to be provided for by their male counterparts and had no need to carry anything on their own person. Though this was clearly not actually true, as women of all classes were known to wear these hidden pocket pouches beneath their skirts. So the French Revolution is sometimes cited as a shifting event in women's freedom to personal possessions. Access to information and money is a dangerous thing in cultures that want to control or limit its population, and it leads to the empowerment and freedom, particularly of subjugated classes. Women's early pockets allowed some possessions to be hidden on her person, which could include books and pamphlets on top of the other hidden treasures already mentioned. Now, whether the revolution was actually the inciting incident or not, after the revolution, the style of women's fashions did change considerably from voluminous skirts to raised waistlines and long, lean silhouettes, under which pockets could no longer be attractively hidden. Women were limited in what they could now carry on their person and being held more publicly accountable for this. As a consolation for the loss of pockets, women were offered tiny, heavily, dainty, ornate bags called reticules, in which to carry the most minimum of objects. An interesting quality of these early purses was that they were often made with fine netting or lace material, exposing the contents within, making them even less a private hiding place for their personal possessions. These bags illustrate not only the limitations of women's access to possessions in public, but also to their ability to participate in society, as reticules were carried in the hand and not tied to the body, which meant that one hand was always being occupied while in public. What follows historically is a roller coaster of society's ideals on the female position and silhouette driving fashion trends, followed by a powerful subversive pushback by women for more agency and independence. The 19th century saw groups such as the Rational Dress Society in London calling for clothing that wouldn't cause any more physical bodily harm, which was a side effect of tight corsets, were lighter and less ungainly to move around in, and which had access to pockets. This new woman wore a shorter hemline, less full skirts, and had sewn-in pockets in her jacket and dress. The movement is amongst those which lead to the suffragettes, who sought and fought for women's rights, including the rights for women to wear comfortable clothes, and sometimes even pants. This suit here is an example of the looser fit and higher hemline, which allowed for more ease of movement, as well as this suiting style mimicking a man's suit, which allowed for women to have pockets in similar positions to men. So the style shift post-suffragette fashion was once again towards long, lean lines as seen in the fashion of the 20s, representing the carefree attitudes post-World War I, when no one was to have any worries, particularly not the fashionable flapper girl, followed by women in the 30s and 40s who were afforded pockets and pants for the first time as part of their regular wardrobe, once it became critical that they were independent and functional members of society while the male population was away at war. After the war, the idealized woman's place returned to being in the home, making their male partners a priority. This was reflected in a silhouette where once again women's hips became exaggerated, their shoulders softened, and the focus was on the perfected female form instead of on accommodating a functional independent participant within greater society. Women had no need for her own pockets because their husbands were to provide for them in every way outside of the home. Celebrated designer Christian Dior himself allegedly said, "Men have pockets to keep things in and women for decoration," affirming the disregard of a woman's need to access her own things. A small handbag was still the standby accessory for women to carry whatever might be necessary. The changes in women's fashion continues through the 60s with a turn towards suit sets that include pockets, followed by the long, lean lines of the 70s, which on the one hand would finally make pants a regular component of women's wardrobe, but on the other often styled them to be so tight-fitting that they would not allow anything to be actually stored within them. This is a great example of that here, where we actually have the suggestion of 4 different pockets, and yet not one of them is actually practical. The Fanny Pack of the 80s was a great solution to this, with a nod to the belt pouches of the Middle Ages, as it was both functional storage and didn't take away the use of one hand for the woman wearing it. But alas, this too fell out of fashion by the turn of the 21st century. Most recently, the trend of skinny jeans and leggings, another long, lean silhouette, has limited our ability to carry our ever-growing cell phones, wallets, lip balm, and keys on our own person, unlike our male counterparts, forcing us to still hide objects discreetly within our clothing or to be dependent on a bag when out in public. This continues to fuel the purse industry, which has dominated the fashion accessory market since the emergence of those diminutive little reticules back in the early 18th century. When purses are such a lucrative industry as this, why would fashion ever roll over to accommodate clothing options such as pockets, which would compete with this market? Fashion is still ultimately a male-dominated industry, and some would argue that because of this, functional pockets are still a hard-to-find component of women's clothing. Is this an effort to continue to subjugate women and limit their ability to compete with men outside of the home? Perhaps, but it may also simply be an adherence to historical traditions and expectations. It's hard to say for sure, but knowing the importance of functional pockets and the limitations of carrying a purse or bag in public places still makes pockets one of the most treasured components of a woman's wardrobe.